Wow, this is an amazing crowd. We are all so excited to have this enormous crowd of members of the film ecosystem in Minnesota here as part of the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Film Festival. How many of you in the room know that the film festival is going on right now? Yay! And how many of you have been coming to our films? Fabulous. Some of you have not. There's still some time. And I guess I didn't introduce myself. I'm Susan Smolhowski, the executive director of the Film Society, which is the umbrella organization that hosts this festival every year, and that also a year and a half ago took over the main theater, the main cinema over here. We now run films from across the globe every day of the year. And we also bring in, and this is really important, I think, for many of you in this room, a lot of Minnesota-made productions. And this is part of our expansion. So it's very exciting for us to have you in the room. I know you're here to see our special guests. But I also have the feeling that you're here, that there's another energy in the room. It feels as if you're here because you're just enjoying one another's company. Am I right? Yeah. It feels like it's been a long time since you all were in a room together, and it makes us really happy to be able to provide that opportunity to all of you. So thank you for that. We're going to be really quick. This is my colleague. I know many of you know Craig Rice. And he's going to tell you a little bit about what we're doing, but you may know that the festival is 43 years on, so one of the longest running festivals in the country. And the Film Society is 62 years old. We have not been around all that time, but it's really a testament to the fact that we bring in amazing films that are representative of the storytelling across the globe. So we're very happy to have you here. And here is my friend and colleague, Craig Rice.
Thank you. Unfortunately or fortunately, I actually have been here for 63 years. Al helped me to understand cinema when I was a teenager and wanted to make films and didn't know how to make films or what there was other than Hollywood films. He introduced me to a whole other world of cinema, which we continue to carry on right now, which is independent international cinema, which is places us, not just Minnesota, but places us as a country in the globe, and this is what we continue to do now for these years. The festival, I think, is amazing, and if you've not taken advantage of it, please do, because it is what you're going to see yourselves into someday, hopefully, if you make the kinds of films that we sort of expect you to. For me, this is incredible, because there's people here that I went to college with, you know, so it's like this big college reunion. But this is our organization. This is what we are about here in Minnesota. When Steve and I first came up with this idea, I said, no one's going to come. I said, people just seem, you know, we've got maybe 30 people and we'll do it in his garage, you know. But this, to me, is a real tribute to us wanting to stick together, because we, as a group of filmmakers and TV makers, it's us. We are all the only people that are going to save ourselves is us. And it's us getting together and continue to do what we're doing right now, is staying involved in our own industry. This is ours. It doesn't just belong to Hollywood. This doesn't belong to New York. It belongs to us. And we must continue to fight for this. We want to stay here and do this. We have to come together in order for us to make it work for ourselves. Not just the directors, but the actors, the writers, the whole entire community, the camera people, the editors. We need to bring this industry back. It's been a long time. And I want to bring up somebody who is part of our sort of ecosystem here, along with us, the Film Society, along with Film North, is the Minneapolis-St. Paul, sorry, take that back, Minnesota Film and TV Board, Melody Behan.
Hi. I am so thrilled that there are so many industry folks here tonight to welcome Roger and James back to Minnesota. As you all know all too well, they have not been here working since A Serious Man because we have not been competitive. Now, we have $25 million a year in tax credits, and so we are hoping that we'll be able to get them back, and we'll be able to get everybody here back to work. So enjoy, welcome, thanks.
I want to bring up, oh, sure.
Thing. I'm sorry, before we bring up the orchestrator of what we're doing tonight and the person who had the idea with Craig to bring the Deakins into town, because we haven't uttered their name yet, I just have to thank our sponsors, because we are a nonprofit organization. And without our sponsors and our members and those of you who are buying tickets from us, we would be nowhere. So Knock is a huge sponsor of the Film Society, Knock Inc., the Star Tribune, and now US Bank. And so I want to thank all of them for being here tonight. And also Best Buy and Target, a sponsor of tonight's event. So sorry to take it away. Now you can come up, Steve.
Here's Steve Spears, please. CineMechanics.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Industry Night. My name is Steve Spears, and I'm the owner of CineMechanics, a local motion picture camera rental house. And I'd like to first start out by thanking the Minneapolis-St. Film Society for trusting CineMechanics and partnering with us and making this event happen for us. So Susan, Greg, Jesse, Kelly, Maury, thank you very much. This is wonderful. And you know, the Film Society has a mission, and it's a mission that I think everybody in this room would agree with. We all share that we want to nurture the Minnesota film industry, and we want to see it grow with opportunities for all filmmakers. And this room is full of filmmakers. This room is full of craftsmen. This room is full of craftswomen. This room is full of camera assistants, camera operators, producers, directors, editors, gaffers, grips, painters. And it's awesome to have you all here tonight. This event was also sponsored by many of the production companies who rely on the professionals in this room, and I want to thank them for their support as well. This is our community, and we need to get together like this more often. And tonight is a special night. Tonight's guest needs no introduction. Roger Deakins has been the cinematographer on many of the greatest films of our time. He has received the highest honors for his work around the globe. And together, Roger and James Deakins also make up Team Deakins, where they continue to share their passion in filmmaking on their Team Deakins podcast. The discussions they have with filmmakers capture the essence of community and shed light on the immense talents of the people that it takes to make a film. It is a true honor to have them here tonight to share their amazing stories with one of our own, on-set photographer Wilson Webb. So please join me in a warm Minnesota welcome to James and Sir Roger Deakins.
Check. We were promised this would be a garage.
Sorry. Hello, fellow friends, colleagues, Minnesota crew, family. I'm thrilled to see that every one of you received my handwritten invitation. Thank you for coming. I have noted here, though, that some people aren't here, Joe Schlagerman, so that is also noted. But tonight we're here, and it's my honor to interview James and Roger, who I've had the privilege to work with on 3 different projects. And if it's okay, we're just going to get right into it. Since we're here, I wanted to start with the Coens, and I wanted to ask, how did you first hear that they were looking for a new DP in 1990 for Byron Fink?
My agent at the time in the UK said there was a script, but I probably wouldn't be interested in it. It was very odd. And I said, but who's directing it? And she said, a couple of brothers, but I don't know who they are. And I eventually found out, and I said, send me the script.
I think you should also say that you had just quit the film business.
Oh, yeah, right. But that's a long story. You don't really want that. Yeah, I quit the film business, put my house in London up for sale. I'd lived in London for like 7 years, I think. And I moved back to my hometown in Devon, and that was it. And then suddenly the script came up for Barton Fink, yeah.
Why were you about to quit the film business?
It's a long story. I don't want to go there.
We don't have to go there. No, we don't have to go there.
It was
at all.
a Hollywood experience, put it that way.
Gotcha. Enough said. The Coens were also really impressed with your interior shots from the Mike Figgett's Stormy Monday I read.
Were they? That's news.
Yes.
I had no idea what they were impressed with. But I know they talked to the director of the film that I had a terrible experience on, why I gave up the film industry.
Oh, really?
And the director said, well, he operates the camera himself. He doesn't like shooting on zoom lenses. He doesn't like shooting with multiple cameras. And he likes to know or talk about what the shots are before we get there on the day.
Sound familiar?
Yes. Interesting.
Which Joel thought was just perfect, but the director was actually slagging me off.
Right. I can see that. No, they also really liked your Sid and Nancy and work and Island film that you worked on. So when you first started working with them, how different was it to work with 2 directors instead of 1 director per se? Was there any difference the way that they were working? I mean, you're saying they were more planned out and more to your own style. But how about?
Well, I don't think it was more my own style, because Sid and Nancy was like off the cuff. Mm-hmm. But I think you have to have an idea in your head what you want. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I met with Joel and Ethan in Notting Hill. If you want to be a serious conversation now, I met with him in Notting Hill once my agent had decided that I should meet with him. And they would finish each other's sentences. So I knew immediately, because I was nervous about the idea of working with 2 directors, but they're so in sync because they imagine their projects together, they write their projects together, they're doing the, produce, scout, go through storyboarding process, everything together. So they're so in sync,
But what about the time when one would come in and say, well, shouldn't it be a little wider, then go off and the other one? Were they taking the mickey out of you?
No, I was taking the mickey out. It was the only time I worked with them. It was on Barton Fink, and it was a shot where the little brass knob on the bed head falls off and rolls towards the camera. And I'd set it up on 1 lens, and I set it on a sort of wide-ish lens, not as wide as they were doing before I came along. But anyway, and so I set it up, and Ethan would come and said, no, I think it should be a longer lens. So I put a longer lens on, and then Ethan would go off to get coffee, and Joel would come and say, no, I thought it was a wider lens than this. This went on for a while, and I kept playing the game until they figured out it wasn't me.
That makes sense, because Barry Sonnenfeld was their first DP for 3 films, and he, 21 millimeter is kind of normal for him, right? He loves
18. I mean, they were doing really wide, weren't they?
Yes, and in fact, I spoke with Barry recently because he was looking for some photos for something I worked with him on, and I said, do you have any questions? for the Deakins, and he said, yes, ask Roger if one of the brothers liked it tighter and one liked it looser, because I had that problem too. So
Yeah, but I wouldn't know which one would know.
I
which
have
one
it
had
here
which.
actually, which one would like. I do. I think Joel liked everything a little bit tighter, presented a
I
little
think
tighter.
that might be right,
Yeah.
except for on this one occasion, it was the other way around. But I do remember when I first started, they would look through the camera and they would go, what lens is that? And they would look and I'd be like on a 27 or something instead of a 18 or 21.
Right.
So they were, oh, well, okay. And then gradually, by the end of Barton Fink, I got to a 32. So I was really...
So was it kind of a relief after you started working with them, that experience you had that was kind of the opposite before that, and you could find somebody that kind of spoke the way you work as far as pre-production, as far as story, liking to think about things before they happen? And
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I hadn't worked like that before, because I'd done these films with Mike Radford. I'd done one of the first big-ish movies I did was 1984 with Mike Radford, and we did that very much that way. Mm-hmm. We spent a long time just talking about the film, sitting in a room talking about the film and then scouting like you do. We didn't storyboard, but we spent hours in the mornings rehearsing with the actors and then really working out very tightly what we wanted to shoot. Mm-hmm. And so that wasn't quite the process that Joel and Ethan go through, because they do storyboard a lot more than anybody else I've ever worked with. But, it's just that organization and that feeling of that you're collaborating together, so it's that's sort of different than the machine that was the film I was talking about.
Yeah, I think when I first worked with you on Serious Man, it was such a joy to get storyboard in the morning and everyone knew what was happening. Doesn't mean it's going to be exactly that way, but just the difference than, coming in and being crazy chaos like a lot of films are. And it makes everybody kind of focus and everyone starts on the same page. It's a really big relief.
Yeah, it's just such a good way of planning a day, because I was talking to somebody upstairs just now. I mean, as soon as you pick up a camera, it's a compromise. I don't care, but it's always a compromise.
Right.
But if you know exactly the wish list for the day, even if you're not sticking to those shots, you know how much time you have for each part, and you can balance the day better, I think,
And also, if everyone else knows, everyone's able to do their best job. If the prop person knows you're going to be
Right.
in that corner of the room most of the day,
Right.
they can do a better job just by knowing.
The other thing that struck me on Barton Fink, and it was true on Serious Man and all their other films, is how little they actually shoot.
Yes.
I mean,
Right.
how little they shoot. I mean, I'd come off this film I'm talking about. It was Air America, if anybody wants to know. We'd shot like, 1 million feet of film.
Yeah.
And then
yeah.
on Barton Fink, we shot like 150,000,
Right.
if that.
Right. And part of that is because they had planned it. They planned what they knew what they're going to do. Things weren't being tested while you shot.
Well, and it's
Right.
also what we were talking about earlier. It's that when they see they've got it on take 3, that's enough.
Right.
They don't feel the need to do 25 takes, which kind of wears everyone down.
Right.
And doesn't necessarily get you something better.
Except when we did the ball coming off the bed head, we had to do it. We had to do it 2 ways. Well, the first shot's in the movie, but we're still. It's a joke.
When the Coens first gave you the script for Fargo, what were your concerns about that as a story?
The first thing that struck me is, how can you make a movie about someone who's so unlikable? Because on the page, the Bill Macy character was just horrible, and I had real doubts about it. But of course, by casting Bill Macy, you just feel
Right.
so sorry for him
Right.
that
Right.
you can't hate him.
Right.
Yeah, I think that is. It's often with a film, it's a revelation when you actually see the character doing it in situ.
Right. Were there any technical issues that when you read a script like that you think this is going to be challenged because of location or?
Well, don't you think? I mean, they always are. I think
They all
you know,
are, yeah.
anything you
They all
think
are.
it's you know. I mean, Fargo, we come off Hudsucker, and Joel and Ethan said to me, you know, you may not want to do this because we're going back and do this very small film in Minnesota. And, you know, we'd done Hudsucker and not been successful, but it'd been,
Right.
I think, a wonderful experience. And I said, you've got to be kidding, you know. But, you know, you read the script and then realize the budget and the schedule and then the limitations you're going to be under. I mean, obviously the first thing that stood out for me reading the script just technically was all the car stuff at night, you know. So you kind of, those things pop up in your head when you start thinking about things technically after you just read the script as you would anything else.
Right.
But then, you know, those things come up and then they're always worked out as you go along.
Right. When you're thinking about working with a new director, someone that you haven't worked with before, do you feel like you have to know that you have to be on board 100% with their visual language and the way that they are wanting to tell a story, or is there some room to figure it out as you go along? Does that make any sense?
That's a really good question.
You have to be comfortable 100% with who you're going to work with.
The first thing you do is you meet with them to see if what you think the script is what they think it, in broad terms. But I think not being completely in sync is kind of fun too, because it makes it more creative on the set if you're bringing something in that's a little bit different.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, really, because, I mean, if you feel you're just fulfilling somebody else's vision and not adding part of yourself to it, then I don't know, I wouldn't. Why would I be there, you know?
Right.
I mean, I left a film once because I just felt I was the one pushing the button and bouncing a light off a ceiling so somebody could wander around with a Steadicam.
Right.
I mean, it's not, you know, I mean, it's a paycheck, but it's not really anything else. So, I mean, I'm not somebody that's ever said I'm committed totally to work in the industry for the sake of it. That's why I saw my house in London and moved back to Devon.
But at the same time, if you see something as a mystery script, but the director sees it as a horror film, that's the kind of thing you need to know right away.
Sure.
Maybe you should
Big red flags.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be open to somebody's vision because it's collaboration, but you've also got to feel, well, are they going to collaborate? Are they going to allow me to put part of myself in it as well, you know?
And do you want to put your part, yourself
and listen
into
to
it?
your suggestions, even if they're rubbish, but just listen. I don't care if I dismiss them, but you know, allow me to have that, you know.
Right. Roger, you went from studying painting to photography to documentary music videos and then to narratives. Looking back at that progression, do you think that one skill built upon another? Did it help you as you furthered your career?
Yeah, very much. But I mean, it wasn't quite that progression, really. I mean, I was at film school, and at film school, I'd never picked up a camera till I was like mid-20s when I went to film school. I'd never seen a film camera. And I started making my own films at film school because nobody else would hire me to shoot their films because they didn't know what I could do. And then once I shot a couple of my own films, then other students offered me their films, and I started shooting a lot of very, very different kind of films, you know, from dramas to sort of documentaries, all sorts of things, 35mm, 16. And then when I left film school, I did a lot of different things, but I mainly concentrated on documentaries because that's frankly what I got offered more often. And then at one point, that led to, I mean, basically what happened was a film school student that I hadn't really known at the film school, but I started shooting for after he left the film school. I was shooting documentaries with him. He got his first feature film for Channel 4. I shot that. On the basis of that film, he got to direct 1984. So suddenly I was in the feature world. So, it wasn't calculated or anything.
Right.
And I was doing a lot of things. Yeah, I was doing like rock videos, and I was doing all sorts of, I did a TV series. So I did a lot of different things. But yeah, I mainly concentrated on documentaries, so it's 5 or 6 years, I guess. So I think that was really informative, but I think everything you do informs who you are and how you work afterwards. And just, I started as a kid painting, and then I discovered I liked photography, and it was just experimenting with visuals, I suppose, and here I am.
Right. When you made that jump from documentary to narrative, did you find that schedule and the structure of narrative working limiting, or was it kind of a good thing? Because on a documentary, you're finding everything. You're spending a lot of time somewhere in a situation and picking shots and trying to decide what to shoot. And then you go to narrative, it's like, we have to shoot this now and we have this amount of time. I'm wondering if it was a relief in some ways or not.
It's a relief, and you can usually have take two.
Yeah.
And the kind of documentaries I was doing, you just had to get it on the moment.
Right.
But I think what I really liked about features dramas was the collaboration with a crew. I mean, on documentaries, there'll be 2 or 3 of us, or 3 or 4 of us, and maximum. And a number of I did was just 2 of us. So. But I do like that on feature films where you're a group doing it together. But I mean, not all features are the same, I mean, a film like Jarhead, right? It's like handheld, and we didn't rehearse, and we just shot it like a documentary, and you just find it. Sid
But
Nancy
you did
was
have the
represented.
script. So
Yeah, but you
kinda
have
knew where you were going.
a firm basis, yeah.
And you don't necessarily have a preference between shooting that way and shooting more structured.
No, I don't. I really don't. I mean, I like that sort of spontaneous idea, but like I said to you before, as long as everybody's got a vision of where they're headed and not just every day it's sort of different, let's get a bit of this.
Right, you're all working towards a goal.
Yeah, you'll have a kind of common vision of the end product in a way.
In one interview, you said that lighting really scares you. And that you often feel nervous when you walk on set for the first time after not being there for a while, which everyone does. It's not unusual. But I think that's a really important thing for people to hear, because I know you don't necessarily like the term artist or being called an artist, but a lot of people see you that way. And I think it's important that people know just because you reach a certain status doesn't mean you're not still scared or frightened, or it's still a challenge. And that it doesn't necessarily get easier. You just have to keep pushing through it, right? Do you find certain ways of getting through that nervousness, or is it always constant?
I mean, for me, the first day I had professionally on a film, I was sick physically. And I get nervous, definitely, just the same. But I think that you kind of learn that it's part of you. And if you weren't nervous, you wouldn't really be trying, or you wouldn't really care, or you wouldn't be so invested in it. I think you kind of embrace it in that way and just accept it. But it's true, like if you don't shoot for a while, I used to love it going from one film to another. We haven't worked for a while. I'd be terrified going on a film set now. I don't know what I feel like.
Right.
No, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
but
I do.
that's just the nature of it, but you have to accept it.
And
then also, I think you have to embrace the fact that probably everybody else is pretty well, especially the actors, are probably just as nervous as you. So,
And anytime you're trying to do something creative, you're pulling it out from you, and you always wonder if this time's going to be the time it's not there.
Yes.
Because
yeah,
you don't
yeah.
know it's there
Right.
till it comes out.
Right.
So it doesn't go away.
Right. I had the good fortune of working with Harris Savides on a movie, and he told me that as he got older, he lit with less and less instruments. And I'm wondering if that is something you've also experienced or not at all.
I know. Well, I was going to say I know I used to overlight like hell, but then I should take out used to, because I still do sometimes. If I get tired at the end of the day, it's less so on digital actually, because I know I can see what I'm doing a bit clearer.
Right.
I've lost my train of thought now.
That's all right. That's all right.
You've always been a minimalist anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I remember reading, I think it was James Wong Howe wrote about lighting, and he said he got the last film he shot was Lucky Lady, which, so what, but he said, I've got to a point now, I'm lighting a set with 10 lights, whereas when I started, I might have used 60. He said, I wish I had a bit longer, because I want to get down to 1.
It's interesting.
But I think that's not just him. I think that's the nature of the style of lighting of filmmaking, really. I mean, if you look, some of the way I light, it's the big lighting sets, or the way Chivo, Emmanuel Levinsky lights. Huge, or Watkin or somebody, huge amount of light, but it's lights, but it's really creating one big soft source.
Right.
Really
right.
creating one light.
Right.
And that's the way I think lighting in films has gone since like the French New Wave or whatever, it's gone into that more minimal kind of naturalistic look.
Yeah.
You want to start me on it, I'm not sure if that's a little bit too boring, but that's the way it's been going. So I think everybody tries to minimize what they do, and I'm no different, yeah.
And it's interesting to think about what digital cameras can do with, a base stop of 800 or 1600, 3200, and how there seems to be a visual trend right now to not light, actually to add negative, to more control what's not getting to your subject than lighting your subject. I find it not very attractive to look at, but it's a style, and I think it's partially maybe economic too, because it's faster.
Yeah, certainly early days of digital, or early days of fast lenses and fast film stock is no different. Production managers or line producers would be say, what do you need all these lights for?
Right.
And you would say, because I'm lighting, I'm not exposing, I'm lighting. It's a different kind of thing, but people don't see it that way.
Right.
But then you have someone like Bradford Young who takes all the lights out and blacks the ceilings, blacks the floor.
Yeah, well, Harris did as well, didn't he?
Yeah. And then adds it in one by one.
Right, all right, it's fascinating. I quickly learned on, day 1 or 2 of Prisoners that there wasn't going to be a lot of light for me to capture images.
I see where this is coming from.
No, but this is different, because that was stylistic, and but I wanted to ask you specifically, a lot of that film, you lit the background elements and you left a lot of characters in silhouettes. And I'm wondering, emotionally, why you chose to do that and how that connected to the story for you, if there was a reason for that.
I'm sure there was. I'm sure Denny and I talked about it. I'm not sure.
Right.
Yeah, it was that. That film's got a very definite style. But then, when I didn't have much light, I didn't use much light because I wanted a shallow depth of field and all the rest. And it wasn't a huge budget. But then I go back to 1984, where I lit to 4, 5, 6. Every scene I could, some I couldn't, and I'm really frustrated I couldn't because I see it now and I don't like it, but I lit to a high stop to get a certain look. you know, so there's reasons, you know, choices, aren't there, you know?
Right. And that was Denny's first film in America and kind of the biggest budget he had at the time. I remember us shooting the scene where Hugh Jackman's character realizes the girls are missing and he goes to the house to look for them. And the first shot after he gets in the house is kind of a wide shot in the living room. Camera's back in the living room and we see the living room, the kitchen, we see the stairs in the background. Hugh's character comes in, moves across the space, looks out the kitchen window, and then goes down the steps. Then we cut and we see him looking around the basement, come back to the main room, cut, he's looking in the bedroom. I was sitting next to Denny, and you probably, for that shot, and he said something to the effect of, if it was up to me, I'd just keep this all in one shot, this whole scene, all in one shot. So at that time, obviously, and he said this on your podcast when you interviewed him, that he didn't have his voice necessarily yet, or wasn't as confident about making decisions. When you are, I'm not going to say mentoring, but when you are working with someone that maybe doesn't have as much visual experience as you do you feel like it's your place to do what they say or to suggest things, options? Is that a good question? I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, you suggest things and then do what they say.
Okay. True.
I mean, you know, and a lot of the times what you've suggested is taken on board and sometimes it's not. But Denny, I wouldn't have said that because, I mean, he'd done a lot of films in Canada before, I mean, on Sondé and stuff before Prisoners.
Right.
So he's quite a visualist, but I think true that he was doing his first film in America and maybe he was a bit nervous about, I mean, on Sicario, it was different. Because I would say, well, shall we go into coverage now? And he said, no, they might use it.
Right.
So he wouldn't shoot it because he knew, you know. But it's very much like Joel and Ethan, you know, in their world, you storyboard a scene that might be, you know, a wide shot, overs and singles, and then you might do the wide shot and they'll say, okay, that's it.
Right.
But I think it also can be really helpful for a director who's under a lot of pressure and with studio and is this going to cut, to hear from someone that they believe in, to hear, well, maybe you don't need that coverage, and maybe that's what they needed to hear because they were thinking that, but on their own they might not. They might just say, oh, just get the coverage, it's quick. But if you hear from somebody else who also sees it that way, it's really helpful. So it is good to say what you see.
You're there to back up the director as well. I mean, there's a lot of situations, there was one on Sicario where they didn't want to go to Mexico to shoot what was supposed to be in Mexico. And I was the bad boy for that in a production meeting, you know. And Denny will tell you that. I said, you know, I said to the producer, have you read the script?
Right. It's a good question.
Which is kind of, you know.
Yeah. Right. This is sort of changing lanes a little bit, but it has to do with what we just talked about. Not shooting something is a way of editing because they can't use it. Right? What you do in this working relationship is also protecting what is shot in camera so that somebody else can't change it later, right?
Well, they could cut
visually?
It. Well, I'm going into the digital house every day and looking at it and making sure we shoot it the way that we want it to look. But I'm just making sure that it doesn't get timed a different way because if the editor and director live with it blue for 6 to 9 months, they're going to assume it should be blue. So you want to give them as close to the way you see it. So I'm sort of overseeing that all the time.
But you're also following it through, aren't you? You're the one that's badgering to get post-production for us to get eyes on effect shots and eyes on the cut
that
to see
you
what
normally wouldn't
Well, it
have
is
that.
crazy.
Yeah.
It costs them more money.
Yeah.
I mean, shoot, most the directors we work with, they always want us involved. But I mean, James is usually the one well, she's always the one that's, making sure that link's open.
And also, in working with visual effects on the set, oftentimes they're just seeing the elements that they need to do the shot. But it's not necessarily the way the director and the DP want to shoot it. So
Right.
I sit in with them a lot and ask them, what is it that you're trying to get to? Well, could we shoot it this way? Knowing how they want to shoot it, and try and get to a point before it's on the set and there's not a big argument that there's no blue screen there. So it can get kind of fraught at times. So if you work on it ahead of time, because they do have to get what they need to get, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a blue screen or whatever.
Sure.
So
Right.
It is a negotiation during the shooting.
She's the diplomat.
You wouldn't always think that, though, would you?
I was going through my mind because there was one very specific point where the effects supervisor wanted me to surround this whole plane with blue screen. Because the plane's going like that, he wanted blue everywhere out the door and the window. And I said, well, where's the light coming from? You're in a bomber and they got a light bulb in the cabin?
Right.
So we surrounded it by white.
Before, I'm going to go to the podcast a little bit, but I wanted to say before the podcast, there's your website, which you started around 2005. Does that sound right?
Might have been even before. We had to shut it down at one point.
did you?
Because we had a stalker person, and at that point I didn't know how to program in enough security, so I had to shut it down and then learn that programming and then redo it.
Oh, crazy. That's crazy. Well, for a long time, I felt like it was kind of a hidden gem because, you had to be in a certain group to know about it, or it seemed that way. And here you are answering questions that just, anybody answered or asked, and it was great. But where did you first come up with the idea of the website, for starters? Why did you decide to do it?
Well, that was after some screenings that we did on films and Q&As in LA, right? And it was like,
That was more the podcast.
I thought that was before the website too, so we could answer questions that so many students had
I
at
think that really
the.
was the podcast. I think I was learning web programming at the time, and I wanted to practice.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's good. And then in 2020, you began Teen Deakins podcast. Whose idea was that put together, or was it mutual?
I don't know what a podcast is. Come on.
But now that was after we were doing a lot of Q&As for 1917, I think. And afterwards, we would talk to a lot of people and we would answer the same questions.
Right,
and I
right.
said to Roger, I said, well, what if we do a podcast? Because that was originally what we thought it would be. It's just answering questions. Roger said, what's a podcast? I said, well, I don't know. I got to figure it out because I didn't really know. And then we started doing it, and then it took its own life. And when we talk to people that do what they do in the production, all that passion that they have sort of reflected our passion as well. And then we do strongly believe that making a film is a collaborative process. So that prop person should be given time to tell us what they do. And the casting director, I never knew what a casting director really did. And so it just sort of went from there.
Yeah, I mean, it started off, we were just going to talk with people that we work with, that we knew. And then the pandemic came along, and it seemed like all these people were
Bored and wanted to do something.
So we talked to people we didn't imagine, like
Neil Jordan was
Rodionov, the guy who shot Come and See.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked to him in Russia. We talked to the great Russian director, whose name I can never
Andrei
pronounce, Deakins, who's now shooting a film in France. But so we got to talk to all these people during the pandemic that we'd never met, so it was just amazing for us. And,
Yeah. Well,
steamrolled.
We went on to do another movie. We thought, okay, that's over. But then all these people that we ran into kept saying, oh, we like the podcast. We we got to go back and do this.
Well, thank you for doing it. I think not only is it really important to share people's journeys, and people always ask me, like, how do you become a still photographer? And I'd say, just like any job on set, it's a different way for everybody. And just like you got a lot of questions and you thought, I can just let them answer it. I did the same thing. I put a fact on my website so people that are interested, I can direct it to that. But more importantly, what you're doing is really important for history's sake too. And I want to thank you for that, because it's really a great resource. And I'm wondering, when you two first started out in the business, was there any resources or mentors, or how did you find out about what you were wanting to do?
I came up as a script supervisor, and there's only one on the set, and nobody would help me. And I did swear to myself that I would help people along the way.
I didn't have any connection to it. I mean, where I grew up, I had no connection to the film industry. The idea of, it was another planet. So even when I was at film school, even when I left film school, it was like I had no idea how to get in the industry or anything. And so it's been a lot of luck. So I think if one can help at all, and reassure people that want to do it, that it's possible, because if I can get to have had the career I've had, then I think anybody can. But I also like to tell people that you'll feel as nervous on the last one as you did on the first one.
How important is it to pass on the craft of cinematography to other people? Is that something that you also feel is part of what you should be doing?
Well, passing on, I don't know. I mean, I think, I'm flattered this is kind of crazy and it's not a garage. I mean, there's so many people.
It's just a big garage, right?
No, it's crazy, but I mean, if one can, I don't know, inspire people or whatever, I mean, I'm flattered that people come and are interested, but,
I think it's also important to talk to people that do the same things, like cinematographers or prop people or whatever, and see how that same job can be done in different ways,
right.
All of them good.
Yeah.
Because I think that you need to find your way of doing. It's like shooting something. If you don't have your eye, then everything that you do, if you're trying to be somebody else's eye, won't be their eye and won't be yours, so they won't be anything. So to hear different people do the same jobs, and there's so much similarity, their passion and everything, but then they approach it slightly differently, and that's important for people to be able to see, find your way, and you'll excel.
You put that brilliantly. That's what I was trying to say.
Thank
No, I mean, that's great, because it's exactly that, isn't it? But what I was trying to say, you want to kind of inspire people because you love, I love film. I love cinematography. I love all the great work of cinematographers and filmmakers that I grew up with, But you don't want people to copy you. You want people to find their own sense of expression.
Right.
Whatever that is, it's intangible. I don't know what it is, but you want to be inspired by I want to be inspired by what somebody else does. Like I am inspired by Keizo Miyagawa's work, or, the great cinematographers of the past. So that's, when I see it now, I see other cinematographers where I'm inspired by it. There's no way I could do it like it, and they probably wouldn't want to or could do it like I do it. That's not the point. It's to just... As you know, in photography, it's the same thing. It's that just finding your own eye, and that's hopefully not a pretentious way of saying.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk a little bit about the book, Byways, the photo book.
Another outcome of the pandemic.
Is it? Was it?
Well, we finally had some time.
Yeah. yeah. It's something that was sort of always in the back burner, kind of, or?
Well, I mean, it's been my hobby. It's been taking pictures all my life, and I always thought, well, it would be kind of nice to put them together in some shape or form. And the pandemic came along,
And we had a little bit of time, and the agent found a publisher, and
I mean, never meant to be what it's been. I mean, it's kind of like my little doodles. So I stumbled on that, and then suddenly it's been very,
How some people, when you went to edit the book, some people like to stick prints on the wall and move them around. Some people use screen. Some people have an editor that actually says these should go together, and you say yes or no. How did you two decide that process?
we worked with the publisher, and it was funny because also on the podcast, we had talked with the still photographer, Alex Webb, and so I had kept in touch with him, and I said, oh yeah, we're gonna be doing this, and he said, oh, the editing's the worst, you've got to hire a designer, it's gonna be dreadful, but it's worth it, it's gonna be awful. Well, we didn't hire a designer, we just worked with the publisher, and they had certain ideas and the flow, what comes where, but of course Roger had very specific ideas too. And what they wanted is they wanted on-set, the distributors, not the publishers, but they wanted on-set photos.
Right.
And Roger did not want to do that, and doesn't really take them anyway. So it wasn't that hard. We would go back and forth, and you know, what would go in, what wouldn't go in. So, I mean, it was not a horrible experience, like Alex said.
It was great. It was one to go over that
everybody.
idea that, no, I'm not going to put in photographs of Joel and Ethan that I've taken over the years.
Right.
You know, it's not that book. It's my little sketchbook of my own little, you know, things I've seen over the years.
Did you find any surprises going back, looking at images that maybe you hadn't looked at for quite a while?
Not really. There's a couple, but I don't take many pictures. I mean, it's a hobby. I mean, I walked around this morning, I took one shot, maybe I'm not sure. You know, I was out 3 or 4 hours and took one photograph. That's me, you know.
Right.
So I don't take many, so it wasn't a huge selection process, you know.
So there's not going to be a part 2 or 3 or 4?
Well, it will, but that'll be what I've been taking in the last few years.
Right. Sorry, I'm just looking what to say here.
What do you take in your spare time when you're not on a film set?
Well, I take a lot of weird family photos. I'm working on sort of an anti-AI idea that I have right now that I haven't told anybody at all. Maybe 2 people out there, but where I'm actually building things that people are wearing that sort of look like they might have been made by AI, but they were the opposite.
So you build on themes, you photograph themes.
Yeah, but I'm always interested in, I kind of do the same thing. I walk around a lot, and I usually have a camera with me, and it's one of the fringe benefits of working on jobs in different places. As you know, you visit places you wouldn't otherwise visit, but I am attracted to decay, and like Pittsburgh is one of my favorite towns because there's so much interesting intersection between old and new, and the way things are put together and textures, and I'm also black and white enthusiast. It's just how my brain sees.
Except that you got a series on an interior of a prison. I don't know if it's an abandoned prison.
That was
the most amazingly interesting photograph.
Thank you. That was just I had been working on a Ben Stiller piece he was directing, and we're shooting mostly outside of the prison, and it had just been decommissioned. It was over 120-year-old prison that was decommissioned within a month or something that we got there. And so I asked locations, could I go inside on the weekend and shoot these photos? Just because they were there. And again, it isn't necessarily what I would, reach out to do, but just like walking around a city because I'm there, it's there, it's interesting, it's history, it's You know,
Yeah,
all these
it's a great
lives.
record because like each cell, this is interesting, I find. each cell is a prisoner's kind of artwork on the wall.
Yeah.
It's painting or something, and it's the individual prisoner. The cells look so different.
Right.
It's really amazing series.
Yes, yeah, thank you. You get a lot of interesting, naive art from people who have nothing better to do while they're waiting around. So I guess I'm attracted to a lot of different things, but perhaps like yourself, part of it is sometimes an excuse to get out and look at things.
That's what it is for me. It's really an excuse to just wander around a city and just observe, you know. If I take a picture, it's great. If I don't, it's given me a reason to be there.
Right. Is your favorite place to shoot at home, though? Near home?
I like the English seaside. There's something about it, you know, because I've brought up on it. There's a sort of melancholy quality about it, and I kind of, I like that. And there's a sort of humor in it as well. I like, you know.
There's a lot of humor in your work. Yeah. I've also noticed, or I thought I noticed, and I wanted to ask you, your earlier work has more figures in it, figures in stark landscapes, whereas, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like your later work is more the landscapes themselves, shapes, negative space, kind of how things intersect, and I'm curious if that's
just
true.
getting more nervous about photographing people.
Yeah.
No, people are so they don't like when you've got a proper camera. If you just taking a photograph on your cell phone, they don't seem to mind. But as soon as you get a Leica out,
Right.
they see you. What are you doing? You know, it's like I don't know. It's weird. It's like they're going back to, am I taking their soul again or something like that?
Right. In an age where there's cameras everywhere too. Yeah. It's really interesting. You've also said that cinematography and photography are very different ways of seeing, which I can totally understand. But the process and the results and the expectations are all very different. But do you find inspiration from one that informs the other? Like when you're out walking on the beach, maybe you notice an amazing way the light is hitting the sand and you want to try to recreate that in cinematography?
I don't think it's such a direct relationship, but like I said earlier, I think everything you experience affects you. You know, I mean, might be something I saw today will come back in my head if I'm reading a script at some point. You know, you never know, but it's all there somewhere. You just got to dig it out.
Right.
But that's also why it's important to get into the habit of observing, of actually taking in, if you're walking from one point to another, not to just put your head down and think about all the things that you have to do, which is oftentimes what I will tend to do, but it's much better to walk along and look at things and say, oh, I really like the way that line hits into that line, because you do find yourself seeing it later and when you're trying to compose something or something.
One of my favorite things about like first coming to a production, to the office for the first time, is seeing their mood boards. And, you know, sometimes it's the art department, sometimes the director. Once in a while, I'm privy to like if a director has really spent a lot of time and put something together. Do you find with a lot of directors that you work with that they work that way, collecting a body of other people's images, usually still images, to use as kind of reference for what they want the film to look like?
The only time I remember a lot of references was on Jesse James. It was like Andrew and I would get loads of different photo references and just cover the walls and Richard Hoover, what am I saying, the production designer.
Sorry.
We'd all get our references, and by the time we came to the end of pre-production, the corridor of the production office, where you could walk down it and see the film, not in the frame, but in the mood of it, the feel of it, and just the color quality of it. you know, and that was really interesting. But I mean, the other films, you know, you get art department will do references like, it was interesting, the art department did a lot of references for Blade Runner, but they were, you know, they were actually nothing like the way I lit it in the end, you know. But I mean, a lot of those are just ways of finding ways to talk about something.
Right.
And a lot of them, frankly, like certainly on Skyfall, it was also Dennis Gassner was doing, a lot of the references were for the studio.
But sometimes that can be a problem because a lot of people can see references and see that it's a reference to the mood or whatever, but other people, and oftentimes studio people, will come in and be much more literal about it and say, oh, so it's going to be a blue set and it's going to have a light that has to come from here. And they get locked into that. So I think you have to be really careful who you show your
what
references
was it on the art department did all these blue references for the night work, and you could see everything. It was like this moonlight, and it went for miles. And there was practically no way you could light a night shot like that if you wanted to. And I certainly didn't want to. So it's like, okay, why doesn't it look like that?
Yeah, and the studio comes for a week, you know, to see everything, and we're going, could you take that down, please?
It was on 1917, wasn't it?
Well,
I think.
also in Budapest, there
on
was another one
Blade
that...
I wanted to ask about operating the camera and how much of it is so you can be the one in control of the frame, and how much of it is that excitement of being there, right there where the action is happening. Because I feel both, I mean, personally.
No, it really is the latter first. I mean, I think I can control things through the lens. I mean, I kind of light through the lens. But it's also, I love that moment when you see something, especially when it was film and you never had the playback, you didn't even have a monitor to assist. You were the one that was seeing what the audience is going to see before anybody else. You know, and to see a performance with the light right or as good as you could get it, and then the set and everything, just to see what the audience was going to see before anybody else was just magic. So I still love those moments, just watching an actor, you know, through the lens. But it's also, I want to be the one that's responsible for the movement, and so much you find the actor is free to do what they want to do. I mean, the shot's not just that and the operator's doing. It's not. I mean, a lot of films are much more fluid and the actor's much more free to, you know, travel around the set, as you know. And I like to be the one that's kind of in control of whether I pan with them or not, you know, and how I frame it. So, that definitely comes from the fact that I shot documentaries and I can't do it any other way. I'm not going to change, you know.
Sure. And you found ways over your career of things that really work for you, like the aero crane and the power pod head, but also having a crew that you know and trust. I think those are all really important things. I wanted to just briefly touch on, since you brought it up, camera movement. I found your interview with Garrett Brown really interesting, what he said about what happens when you stop. When you stop a movement, a change of state is of great interest to the audience. They have an emotional connection. And of course, that's what movement does, as well as what's happening in the frame. It evokes emotions in us, right? But how much of that is just learning from doing it over time, and how much of it can be taught? That's
the question, isn't it? I mean, I think a lot of it is intuition and how you feel about something. You know, like, why did Denis Villeneuve know that track into that tree was going to be such a shot? Because Bruce, you remember, like Dolly Grip, right? Bruce Hammy was going, really? We're tracking into a tree? And I was saying the same. And it's like a wonderful shot. But without the movement, it wouldn't have been anything. You know, it's just that intuition that there's something fitting emotionally about that moment.
Does that come mostly when you're on set, or does it come when you're reading the script or talking about it with the director? This would be a good place to slowly push in on something.
Yeah, all the way through. And then sometimes you might, like I think even on Sicario at the end, we were talking about how to play that scene in the kitchen. And yeah, in the end, we only pushed in on one side because on the other side, Benicio was doing his own push in by his movement. So he was coming near to the camera. And it was his movement that was kind of it was motivating our movement onto Emily, you know. So, you talk about it in prep maybe, especially with Joel and Ethan, talk about it storyboarding, but it can change on the set a lot. With them, a lot. It's like, oh, maybe we should do a little push here or something, you know. Same with Denis, as you saw in Prisoners, yeah.
Yeah. Joel said something interesting to me once. He was talking about editing and shots, and he said something to the effect of, I like to try not to have cuts within the scene, as few cuts as possible within a scene, because anytime you have a cut, you risk emotionally distancing the audience. And I felt like, whether he felt like that before he worked with you or not, I don't know, but your use of like the aero crane and the power pod and ways you can slowly move the camera and get in places that otherwise you couldn't, kind of facilitates that. Do you feel that's also true as far as editing goes, that anytime you do edit, it's possible that you are going to disconnect your audience emotionally from what's happening?
Yeah, I mean,
Depends on the editor.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the danger of that is, and the more I see it in films actually, is the way lens change is used. If you change perspective by going from a longer lens to a wide lens on the same scene, and you're just going from, like, if you're going from a same size shot on one character to another, and a lens changes, then I think you draw people out of it. It depends on the scene. I mean, otherwise, the extreme is you do 1917 all the time and you just never cut.
Right.
You know, but I don't. You know, I think that can take the audience out of the thing as well, because they're just waiting for a cut.
Right.
Also, sometimes holding on a cut longer than you would expect almost gives you a feeling of threat. I mean, it makes you uneasy. And so you'll see that sometimes in movies. They hold a little bit longer.
Well, yeah, I mean,
and it works.
It's not just a threat, is it? Because it makes the audience think about that moment in a different way. Tarkovsky does that to perfection. You're watching like Stalker or something. You're watching it thinking, "Where's this going?" And then it just goes and goes, and you really have to engage in it. That's very strange.
It's very interesting. Well, I think we're going to have some questions from the audience, if that's okay with you too. Steve and Craig, I'm going to kick it over to you. If your mics work.
The mic, oh, there we go. Okay, I love that. Shit. All right, we have a question. Nick Fritz had a question. Is Nick here? And then just to sort of front load this, Adam Olson, you had a question? Okay, there you go.
Okay. Hello, Mr. Deakins, Mrs. Deakins. It's a pleasure. My name's Nick. I'm an actor-director here in Minnesota. And my question is, what piece of advice would you give to someone who is starting out in the industry as a director to better understand cinematography?
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard questions to answer that. I don't really know. I mean, you just got to watch movies, surely.
Yeah. I think also sometimes you can, as a director, if you are willing to tell the story visually versus by dialogue, because it's almost comforting in a way. You've got all the dialogue there and it tells you what's going on. But if you instead take some of that information and do it in your frame, it hits people on a deeper level. And so if you're constantly thinking of how can I tell this story visually as well as through dialogue, because you can see that so many movies have way too much dialogue. When we did Sicario, Benicio would come up to Denis all the time and say, I don't need these lines, I can say them on my face. And he can, and it's stronger because of that. So I think to start thinking that way, and when you start watching movies and thinking about that, you can say, wow, that frame actually made it feel much more dangerous and nobody said anything.
I think the Coens are a really good example of how they use imagery. And it's interesting because they're so well known for their incredible dialogue. I mean, you wouldn't change a word of their writing, their dialogue. But the way they use images and the way they use images without dialogue, I think is really, really quite incredible, quite almost not unique completely, but I mean, there's few directors that really do it like they do.
Like No Country. And
well, I'm thinking of No Country for Old Men in particular, and I think that's I mean, obviously it wasn't their original material. Most of their material was original, but the way they adapted Cormac's novel and used the sense of his dialogue, and then with images created his world. I don't know, that to me, it's that cinematography is not just what I do. It's like that combination of the imagery with that that concept that they had, yeah. But you know, I mean, cinematography is so varied, isn't it? I mean, you know, I would flippant saying just watch movies, but I mean, I'd watch movies and say, why does that movie affect me? Why does that one affect me and that one leaves me cold? You know, and yeah, and there's some that you can't. The thing about film is that you can't talk about it in a way. If you could talk about it, then why would you make it as a film? I mean, a film's a combination of, you know, character and images and sounds. It's not a novel, it's not a play, it's not something you can describe. That's why, I mean, I love Tarkovsky or something like that, because I don't know what the fuck he's saying half the time, but I know it really emotionally connects with me in some way. And that it's not just the cinematography, but it's a lot of that is the cinematography. It's the way he uses the camera and the way he uses the moments and the way he shows you one thing and not another, you know?
I have another question here by Adam Olson, is a DP and teacher, and he's been in this business a long time, so. Oh, where's the, no, I see him, but where's the mic? Oh, here it comes, I'm sorry.
Thank you for being here. Thanks, CineMechanics. So to follow up, I teach production at Minneapolis College, and a lot of students will ask, what should I do to be prepared as a cinematographer in 2024, starting out when you get out of film school?
What should I do to prepare to become a cinematographer? Is that right, Adam?
Yeah.
I was going to be really flippant and say learn all you can about AI, but I don't know.
No.
You know, that's a hard one because you know, one's a creature of one's time. Starting out now, I do think there is films are going to be made in a different way, and most films are already being made in a different way. There's a huge amount even films you wouldn't think are created in a computer. A huge amount of film, the film you see is created in a computer. And that there's good and bad about that, obviously, because it opens up all kinds of possibilities for filmmaking that you couldn't do if you had to do it all in camera. But there's dangers as well. But I do think if I was starting out now, I would really delve into that. You know, in fact, we're trying to, actually a little bit, but that's something else. But I mean, I think it'd be really interesting what you can do with it and the possibilities. Because basically, you know, we've consulted and we worked in animation. You know, and you think, well, that's so different than, you know, No Country for Old Men or something is so different than doing Rango or something. But it's not. It's still the same sort of storytelling using images and movement and composition and sound to tell a story. So I think any technique, you kind of embrace it, really. And that's what I would say. You have to embrace all the new possibilities and not be a Luddite.
Bayapti, a filmmaker.
Thank you again for being here and for everybody being here. My question is twofold. What is your approach to different genres of film? Do you have a different approach to different genres? And how much is the camera or your approach to filmmaking participatory or voyeuristic? How much is the camera investigating, instigating, questioning the scene? Thank you.
Depends on the film, number one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the second part. I mean, voyeuristic. I think I kind of stopped shooting documentaries because I started feeling it was voyeuristic. It doesn't matter how much you kind of felt invested in the subject and empathize with the subject. Somehow it started feeling voyeuristic to me. But I don't think that is true of feature films. I suppose it can be, but I hope that I haven't worked on films that have been voyeuristic.
You just don't like the word, but I
Well,
mean,
I don't know. Maybe I don't know the right
yeah, I think
translation of it.
some that you're more observational, as
Right.
Fargo was.
Well,
supposed to
definitely,
be,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
And then others that you're more, you know, it depends on the film whether you're going to play it more on tight.
Yeah, I mean, there's the stylistic difference, but you're still trying to connect the audience to the characters. I mean, even if you're, like, for Fargo, the boys were saying they wanted it to feel more observational. So you're shooting with a slightly longer lens and not doing such ostentatious camera moves as, say, Fink or Hudsucker. So there's a difference stylistically, but I wouldn't... voyeuristic is probably just the word I'm not quite sure about. Voyeuristic implies something a little bit not so nice, really. What was the other part of the question? I'm sorry.
Genres. So different approaches to different genres. How do you go about that? If there's a...
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I don't... See, it's story. I don't think, why would you approach one differently from the other? I mean, you might say, like, a Blade Runner is very different from a Jesse James, but that's the story. It's not because it's necessarily because it's different genre. I mean, I'm always trying to create a world that's believable, that the audience can feel they're in, you know? And you might want to stylize it a little bit, like The Man Who Wasn't There, but it's still is a different genre, but you're still trying to create a world that for the audience is believable, this one they can feel connected to, you know? But it does come from the script, not necessarily the genre, you know what I mean? But then I suppose I don't think of it like that anyway. I just read the script, talk to the director and think, oh, what the hell am I going to do?
Right.
I have a question in the front row.
Yeah, we have a couple here.
Hi.
I'm wondering, for young photographers and cinematographers who are still struggling to understand the relationship between light and image, could you point us to, was there a single practice or lesson that helped make that relationship click for you or make you understand light better?
Fishing.
Fishing's good. I go to fishing. I like light. I don't understand light. What is light? If you want to get really technical, I have no idea what light is. Understanding it, I don't know. It's just like we were talking. You just walk a street. Just look at it from day to day, the way it changes. I mean, James was joking about me going fishing, but as a kid, I spent most of my childhood fishing. Early morning, late at night, watching, sun go down, stars come up, the light change. I know it sounds silly, but that informed me about light, maybe, I don't know. But I think it's just, and as I said before, just watching movies and think, why does that imagery affect me so much? And just kind of contemplating what it is, the way the light and the composition works in unity. I don't know.
A question from Matthew Hazel. He was AC, first, second AC. He's been in the business for 8 years.
Hi, good evening. A similar question was asked earlier, but my question was, were there any moments in your life that stood out to you in terms of lighting or a perspective that yielded maybe a composition that stuck with you so much that you wanted to sort of emulate and recreate it in a film? And if so, what film?
No. No, nothing specific. There's so many images that are in my head that there's so many paintings I love, but I'm not going to reproduce it in a movie. No, I'm not.
Okay, no.
Yeah, it's just part of it. Things affect you. You look at things like, I love Giorgio de Chirico's surrealist images, but I can't think of anything that connects something I've done to that. Or Edward Munch, his painting The Sick Child, which he did about 50 times, but is my favorite painting probably, but I don't think of an image that I've done that's anywhere comparable to that. But no, all the things stick in your head. And
Okay, one more question from the audience.
Here, one sec.
First of all, thank you for being here. You mentioned earlier that you might have a different approach from the director. For the film, Wells Fargo, was there a scene where you really felt strongly that it should be shot in a different way than the director and that you prevailed?
I can't think of one.
There's an example of when you saw a shot that wasn't on the storyboard when you were looking down on the parking lot.
There's a lot of things like, in Fargo, the parking lot, when Bill Macy comes out and scrapes the windscreen, the high top shot looking down, we had 200 cars lined up to fill the parking lot. And I was looking down at the shot. We were setting it up before call, I think it was. And I said, can we get Joel up here and have a look? And he said, yeah, but what are we going to do with 200 cars? So things change. But I can't think of a very specific, like a huge difference between the way I'd see something and the way a director sees something. But because usually by the time you get to set and you're shooting,
You've talked about it
you've
so
talked
much.
about
Yeah.
it, or you've watched the blocking with the actors that morning, and you just work it out. I mean, there's definitely times where things have changed, and it's maybe my idea, or maybe it was Bruce Hammy, the Dolly Grip's idea, or somebody else's idea. I mean, sometimes you've said some things and changed completely the storyboard, for instance. But I mean, it's not like a conflict. It's just that's part of the sort of like the cooking part, isn't it?
And besides the fact, he always gets, the director, he always gets the last word in the cutting anyway, because you can shoot it a certain way and then they cut it a completely different way. So it's not really cut the best way for the way you shot it, but you know, that's what they saw.
What's best anyway.
I had a question as well. Sorry, we're running out of time, but you mentioned something about how sometimes less dialogue can touch people more. And I've also felt like through film, some of the films that have touched me the most are 24 Frames by Kiarostami or Patricio Guzman, Nostalgia for the Light. Some films that have that harmony, the last one of words and the imagery and the observational part. So I wonder, when you were talking about working with something more observational, and how are the two techniques working for you? Are there different ways how you approach them so then you can, you know, translate that to the public when you're doing something more observational versus more dialogue?
So you're saying how do you approach, sorry, I just missed the last part. Say that again.
Yeah, so how do you approach something that has more dialogue versus something that is more observational? And,
Oh, well, I don't think that's, I don't think it's different just because, you know, there's dialogue.
You still want the frame to say something as well.
It was just, it's the way the way that combined. I mean, there's a lot of dialogue in Joel and Ethan's films. There's a lot of dialogue, but it's the way it's used with a transition through the imagery. I'm not approaching it differently. I mean,
sometimes it's wonderful, depending on what the film is, but if the framing and the frame itself says one thing and then the actor's saying a completely different thing, it's great. So to be aware that you have this other tool, what you put in the frame and where you place the characters in the frame is saying one thing, and you can make it say the same thing that the actors are saying, or you could make it say something completely different.
Yeah.
It's just another tool in your toolbox.
Yeah, you can counter what's being said to an effect, can't you?
Great.
You know, but I mean, you know, just because it's dialogue, you don't have to be there. You know, which if you're watching TV, that's what you think you would have to be because that's what most of it is. But it doesn't have to be a talking head. It can be there in silhouette.
But if you have a big name actor, they're not going to be happy. They're going to say, "Why are you shooting the back of my head?"
She's remembering one particular occasion. But that's the wonderful thing. You just straight dialogue doesn't necessarily have to be within this context, within this perspective. Although maybe 9 times out of 10 it is. But it doesn't have to be. Depends on the moment. You know, it depends on the perspective you want to give the audience.
Well, that's also the beauty of films, is you've got all these elements and you can put them in different ways. You could be showing one thing and then hearing another conversation or something. It's what makes it different from books or a painting, that you've got these different moving elements that you can really play with.
A question from Andy Turpin, producer.
So thank you for being here. This is very exciting. So I've been working with a lot of first-time directors. I've been producing for some studios, and it's interesting to have directors talk with DPs for the first time. And so this is kind of a twofold question. Have you ever turned down a director to work with, and why? And what do you find a director, what is the best thing a director can say to you that you go, okay, I want to work with that director? Because for me, as a producer, if I have a director come in and they have these ideas of what the film looks like, and they sometimes can't communicate exactly what they want with a DP, and it's super important because, especially with some of the directors that we're giving opportunities to now, haven't really worked a lot with DPs, and especially in film, DPs are so important. I mean, TV, you're the only consistent thing, directors come and go, but is there a certain way that you talk to a first-time director or some of the directors that don't have a lot of experience with?
I think that we've found kind of across the board in talking with directors and directors that are starting out, one of the most important things for the director is they'll walk on the set and feel like they have to have all the answers, but the crew does not expect them to have all the answers. And actually what we respond to and what all the crew will respond to is a collaborative spirit. So I think that it must be incredibly daunting to be a first-time director and walk on the set. So I understand, but they should have that faith. If they have good crew, that crew knows that it's what the director wants, and they're going to try and pull it out of them. So that is actually also the responsibility of the DP and the other crew. Even if they can't, if they have a vision, that's great. That's what we all want. And it's kind of our responsibility to try and get it out of them, because some people have a harder time than others to get it out. But not to feel that they have to have all the answers, and they can turn to their DP and not feel threatened if the DP has a point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I think that entirely, but I also think there's no rules. You know, I don't think, why should a director, I mean, I've worked with a director years ago, a director said, I have no idea about the camera. I'm gonna direct the actors and concentrate on the script, and you tell me how we'll cover it. Now, I would rather have a director say, you know, a clear idea, even if they find it hard to explain, but a kind of visual, kind of something in their head visual. But then I said to this director, I said, but I'll do that, but I'm always going to talk to you about why I think we should cover it in a certain way and what I'm going to do. Because it's ridiculous to think that the cinematographer is just going to take over that side of it. That doesn't work. But I don't think there are any rules. I mean, I think the only thing a director needs is passion. Passion for doing the project that they've got. I don't think they need anything else.
All right, we are going to freeze, first of all. Everybody freeze, don't move, nobody move. We're going to take a picture. Wilson Webb is going to take this picture with them and you in the background, okay?
That's great.
So freeze,
Yeah.
We're going to do that first.
Okay, we're going to do one with film camera first. Ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. One more of this. 32. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then we're going to do a couple with this real quick. Everybody in the background. Okay, great. And then on the count of 3, we're going to say, thank you, Team Deakins. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Thank you, Team Deakins. Now, how about if everybody stands up and we take one more, last one. Ready? On the count of 3. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Yay. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, James and Roger. Thank you.
I want everybody to give them a round of applause for their time and energy for us. We also have